He love-bombed me, controlled me, and broke me down. I escaped, cut him off, and now I'm unstoppable. It didn't start bad, it never does. When I first met Ryan, he was everything I thought I wanted. Charming, funny, confident. He had this way of making you feel like you were the only person in the room. I met him at a friend's party, one I'd almost skipped because I was tired after work. But there he was, with his easy smile and magnetic energy, pulling me into a conversation before I even realized what was happening. "You've got the kind of laugh that makes people want to be around you," he said, his eyes locking on mine. "It's contagious." I remember blushing, thinking he was unlike anyone I'd ever met. We talked for hours that night, and by the time I left, my cheeks hurt from smiling. He texted me the next morning. The first few months with Ryan were perfect. He was attentive in a way that felt overwhelming, but also flattering. He texted me constantly, wanting to know where I was, how my day was going, what I was thinking. At first, I thought it was sweet proof that he really cared about me. He'd surprise me with little gifts, my favorite coffee waiting on my desk at work, flowers left outside my apartment, handwritten notes telling me how much he adored me. "I've never felt this way about anyone before," he said one night as we sat on my couch, his arm draped over my shoulder. "You're my everything." It felt intoxicating, like I'd found someone who saw me in a way no one else ever had. The first fight was small, barely even a fight. I'd gone out with some friends from work for happy hour, and I was a little late responding to his texts. When I finally checked my phone, I had 6 missed calls and a string of messages. "Where are you? Why aren't you answering? Are you okay? I guess you're too busy for me." I texted him back, apologizing and explaining that I'd been caught up talking with my coworkers. He didn't respond for a while, and when he finally did, it was short and cold. Nice to know where I stand. When I got home that night, I called him, trying to smooth things over. He picked up on the second ring, his voice clipped. "You can't just disappear like that," he said. "Do you know how worried I was? Anything could have happened to you." "I'm sorry," I said, feeling guilt creep in even though I knew I hadn't done anything wrong. "I didn't mean to worry you." He softened then, his tone shifting. "I just care about you so much. I don't want anything to happen to you." It felt reasonable, sweet, even, so I let it go. Over time, his concerns started to feel less like love and more like control. "Why do you need to go out with them again?" he asked one night when I mentioned another happy hour with my coworkers. "Didn't you just see them last week?" "They're my friends, Ryan," I said, laughing nervously. "I just don't get why you'd rather spend time with them than me," he said, his jaw tightening. It became a pattern. Anytime I made plans that didn't include him, he'd find a way to make me feel guilty. "I thought you wanted this to work," he'd say. "But it feels like I'm the only one trying," so I started saying no to plans. I saw my friends less and less, convincing myself that it wasn't a big deal. Ryan needed me, and wasn't that what a good partner did, make sacrifices for the person they loved? The first time he raised his voice at me, I froze. We were in the kitchen and I'd accidentally spilled a glass of water. It splashed across the counter, soaking the takeout boxes we'd just brought home. "For God's sake, can't you be more careful?" he snapped, his voice sharp and loud enough to make me flinch. "It was an accident," I said, reaching for a towel. "Yeah, well, maybe if you paid more attention, things like this wouldn't happen," he said, glaring at me. I wanted to yell back, to tell him he was being ridiculous, but I didn't. Instead, I mumbled another apology and cleaned up the mess in silence. He apologized later, wrapping his arms around me and kissing my forehead. "I didn't mean to snap," he said. "I've just been stressed. Work's been crazy and I took it out on you." "I'm sorry." I forgave him. Of course I did. Everyone gets stressed, right? But after that, I found myself tiptoeing around him, second-guessing everything I said and did. I didn't want to upset him, didn't want to trigger another outburst. Ryan didn't like my friends. He never said it outright, but it was clear. Do you really think they care about you? He'd ask, his tone casual but his words cutting. I mean, they didn't even check on you when you were sick last month, did they? They're busy, I'd say, but his words planted seeds of doubt. Before long, I stopped reaching out to them altogether. It was easier than dealing with Ryan's questions and criticisms. Even my family wasn't immune. You know, your mom doesn't really like me, he said one night after we'd had dinner with my parents. What are you talking about? I asked, confused. She kept making those little comments, he said, shaking his head. It's fine, though. I'm used to it. I just hope you don't listen to her. She doesn't understand us. I didn't know what comment he was talking about, but I found myself pulling away from my mom anyway. Looking back, the signs were everywhere, but at the time, I couldn't see them clearly. I was too wrapped up in the idea of who Ryan was in the beginning, the man who told me my laugh was contagious, who made me feel special in a way no one else ever had. But the man I was with now wasn't the same. He was controlling, quick to anger, and always found a way to make me feel like I was in the wrong. I started to feel like I was shrinking, like the vibrant, independent person I'd been before Ryan was slowly disappearing. And the worst part, I didn't know how to stop it. It was small at first, the cracks in Ryan's perfect facade. For months, I had convinced myself that his controlling behavior was love, that his anger was stress, and that the isolation I felt was somehow my fault. But the cracks grew and the illusion shattered. The breaking point came on a rainy Thursday night. It started over something stupid, like most of our fights did. I'd forgotten to text him when I got home from work. I'd been distracted, tired, and the thought had simply slipped my mind. When he called, his voice was sharp. Do you even care about how I feel? He snapped, what are you talking about? I asked, confused. You didn't text me, he said, his tone accusing. I asked for one thing, one simple thing, and you can't even do that. I forgot, I said, trying to keep my voice calm. It's not a big deal, it's a big deal to me, he shouted. You're so selfish sometimes, you know that? The accusation stung, but I stayed quiet, letting him rant. By the time he showed up at my apartment, I was on edge. I hadn't invited him over, but Ryan never asked, he just showed up. When I opened the door, his face was stormy, his jaw tight. I can't keep doing this, he said, stepping inside without waiting for an invitation. I'm the only one putting in effort and you just don't care. That's not true, I said, my voice shaking. I do care, Ryan, you're blowing this out of proportion. He laughed bitterly, blowing it out of proportion? That's what you think. Maybe if you'd put half the effort into this relationship that I do. Effort, I snapped, cutting him off. You think this is effort, controlling where I go, who I see, what I do. That's not love, Ryan, that's suffocating. His eyes darkened, and for a moment, I thought he might hit me. But he didn't. Instead, he stepped back, his face twisting into something cold and cruel. You're lucky I put up with you, he said, his voice low. No one else would. Those words echoed in my head long after he left. For months, I had been questioning myself, wondering if I was the problem, if I wasn't good enough. But in that moment, something clicked. Those words echoed in my head long after he left. For months, I had been questioning myself, wondering if I was the problem, if I wasn't good enough. But in that moment, something clicked. Hey, Mom, I said when she answered, my voice trembling, sweetheart, is everything okay? She asked, immediately picking up on the emotion in my voice. I hesitated, then said, no, I don't think it is. The words opened a floodgate. I told her everything, how Ryan had been controlling me, isolating me, making me feel like I wasn't enough. I told her about the fights, the guilt, the fear. By the time I finished, I was crying and Mom was silent on the other end. I'm coming over, she said finally. No, you don't have to. I'm coming over, she repeated, her voice firm. With Mom's support, I started to rebuild. It wasn't easy. Ryan didn't take the breakup well. He showed up at my apartment, pounding on the door and begging me to let him in. He sent me long, rambling texts, alternating between apologies and accusations, but I didn't respond. I changed my locks. I blocked his number. I told my friends what had happened, and they rallied around me in a way I hadn't expected. For the first time in months, I started to feel like myself again. It's been a year now, a year since I walked away from Ryan, from the relationship that nearly destroyed me. Looking back, I see the signs so clearly. The love bombing, the guilt trips, the isolation, it was all there from the beginning. But when you're in it, it's hard to see the truth. I still have scars, both emotional and mental. Trusting people is harder now, and I'm still learning how to let go of the guilt I carried for so long, but I'm stronger. I'm learning how to stand on my own 2 feet again, how to reclaim the parts of myself I lost along the way. And most importantly, I know now that love isn't supposed to hurt. If you like the video, please leave a like, comment, and subscribe for more videos like this.